Today is our first message in this brand new series called The Great Beyond. I want to start with a little story. When I was a kid, I used to have this recurring dream. And in this dream, the stars were a map, and this map led to a secret treasure. And I was really excited. I never could figure out what the treasure was because the dream always ended, but I was super stoked. And I started to believe it was real at a certain point. This dream happened so many times, and I was like, this is a real thing. And I remember I was so serious about it that I'd be like on the playground as a kid, and I'd be like talking to other kids, like, you know about the map, right? You know, like the stars, right? Yeah? You know. And they'd be like, what? No? And I'd be like, you don't? You don't? What? The map. This, the treasure. And then I'd be like, you don't know? You don't know? Like, what? And I started to become pretty judgmental. And my cousin one time pulled me aside, and she was like, you can't be doing that. You can't be talking to kids about this stuff that's, But I thought about that recently because I thought about how we all have these things that we believe and that are close to our hearts, these beliefs about things that maybe are beyond our understanding or beyond our sight. And sometimes these beliefs can enrich our lives and be practical in our day-to-day spirituality. And sometimes these beliefs are not practical. Sometimes they just distance us from one another. And so it is healthy to kind of examine, what are our beliefs actually doing in our lives? What effect are they having? See, I believe that spirituality can be both about approaching the deep mysteries of being, but it can also be about living well, living skillfully, being present, incorporating the mystery into our day-to-day lives, and about remaining grounded as a human being. I believe spirituality can be both. Because we as human beings, we live in this center point between the mystical and the mundane. We're surrounded by miracles, by mystery. We have these big questions like, who are we? What are we doing here on this planet? And yet at the same time, we have to pay taxes. We sit in traffic. Some of us have to pick up dog poop pretty regularly. Or maybe we're, you just deal with a bout of crankiness that we all face, in others, in ourselves. The other day, me and Olivia went to the grocery store, and that alone just makes me cranky. I don't do well at the grocery store, okay? I'm working on it. And I was being just kind of rude to her, and I just realized, like, this isn't who I want to be. I don't want to be the grocery store, goblin. And so I said to her, I'm sorry. I realize I'm being a jerk right now. I'm sorry. And she went, that's okay. Yeah, you were. And I was like, did she just call me a jerk? Like, what? She's not allowed to actually agree with me. But we all do this, right? We all just have these day-to-day difficulties of just being. And I think that this understanding of how we live in the center of mystery and the mundane actually can help these problems, and they really actually serve to help one another. See, there are moments in our lives where plans are just derailed, right? Like your flight is delayed, or your job's not going the way you want it to, or just fill in the blank for whatever might be going on in your life that's a deep inconvenience. And there are times where the acknowledgement that you and I are part of this massive, wonderfully miraculous universe, that we have this gift of life, and here we are surrounded by mystery, that it can put our problems into a healthy perspective. That we have these moments where we realize, wow, these things that I'm worried about, they're not actually big in the grand scheme of things. Maybe I can relax a little and just try to enjoy. But then at the same time, the opposite is true. Not only does the mystical help the mundane, but sometimes the mundane can help the mystical. See, I have this problem where I can really get stuck thinking about the big questions a little too much. And it leads me down a rabbit hole, and sometimes I'm just all existential, and I'm like, what is life? Who am I? What's going on? And sometimes the simple, basic realities of life can be grounding. Doing the dishes, picking up after the dog, petting the dog, trying to be a nicer partner or spouse. These are actually things that ground us, and they can alleviate some of the difficulty that we run into when we do get caught up in the big picture. There's an ancient Zen proverb: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Right? And so our spiritual practices, our spiritual outlook, our frameworks that we carry with us, they operate almost like this box that we bring along with us on the journey of life. And it's in this box that we're able to take the infinite and bring it into the finite. We're able to take the extraordinary and bring it into the ordinary. We're able to take the supernatural and bring it productively into the natural. And so it's our practices, it's our spirituality that act as a container for these mysterious aspects of life. And often this container comes in the form of language, it comes in the form of story, myth. But I have a quick rule of thumb before we get any further. If it's not practical, if it cannot be made practical, then I'd ask you, these beliefs, this relationship to mystery, how is it helping? Is it practical? Is it actually something that you can bring in to your day-to-day life? And this is really the question that we're going to be asking in this series called The Great Beyond. Because I believe that faith and spirituality, they're not necessarily about figuring out the mystery. I think that that's really an impossible thing to do. It's a bit of a fool's errand. No, I believe faith and spirituality are about trying to have a relationship with it, trying to create a space to encounter it beyond the mental exercise of trying to figure it out. Richard Rohr says, mystery is not that which is unknowable, but that which is endlessly knowable. So often we want to arrive at a certain point of understanding or arrive at a certain point of self-actualization. And I think that this understanding encourages us to remember it's not that we ever arrive or we don't arrive. It's that we are endlessly arriving. We are endlessly becoming, endlessly coming into being and who we are. Yet our culture does not like this. Our culture doesn't think this way. Our materialist society is built around trying to take the guesswork out of everything. Every new product that comes into the marketplace is really built upon the promise, oh, this is going to make it one step easier. This is going to take the guesswork out of this thing, right? Think about Amazon. Well, a week shipping, 2-day shipping, it's going to be like instant shipping at a certain point. This is why we love tracking numbers, right? I want to know where my package is right now. I'm so guilty of this. They're like, it's out for delivery. I'm like, how many feet away from my house is it out for delivery? We just want to take the guesswork out of everything. This is why I'm going to state a controversial opinion now, but I am not for binge watching television. Anyone with me? Anyone with me? We're going to march into the streets. No binge watching. No, and the reason is because I miss the days where a TV show ended on a cliffhanger and then you just had to wait a year and you just had to sit with that feeling like who was behind, who shot, who did what. It's like I miss those days where you had to just sit with your feelings and come up with a million theories and all that. It was fun. Nowadays it's like next season, Netflix doesn't even let you finish the credits. It's like, watch this other show. And it's like, no, I miss those days. And I think truly one of the biggest culprits of trying to take the guesswork out of anything, of trying to take the uncertainty out of life, is Western religion. Western religion often loves certainty, at least certain expressions of Western religion. Anyone who's grown up in a religious system that maybe they have evolved from has looked back and said, there was this addiction to certainty, and it's hard to sit with the unknowing. Which is why often churches around the country, even today, are giving out easy, clean, simple answers to really impossible questions. And even at times, atheism can sort of function as a Western religion. Again, all love to all my atheists out there, but there is a form and an expression of atheism that is also addicted to certainty, because I'm certain that there's nothing. And so there's no room for anything in the middle. There's no room for unknowing. But I would say this. I think it's something that's deeply true for all of us. On some level, we all know that what we don't know is greater than what we do know. That's a tongue twister, so I'm going to say it again. We all know that what we don't know is greater than what we do know, right? This is reflected very well in science. See, I find that science has this incredible posture of humility. The scientific method is really about being proven wrong. It's about attempting to prove itself wrong again and again and again in the course of finding greater nuggets of truth. This is why so many things that we take as givens in life, like gravity, evolution, the Big Bang, are still theories, because the criteria to move beyond a theory is so rigorous that science has the humility to say, we're not certain, we don't know. We're just going to continue to try to test our hypotheses in the pursuit of more and more understanding. And the beauty of this is that science has no endpoint. Science doesn't end. There's no discovery that will end all the searches, right? Every discovery just pushes the mystery down a layer. Once we discover this, then it's what's beyond that. We split the atom, and then we split the thing that we got when we split the atom, and then we split that thing, and we've gone down and down and down. And right now we're at quarks, but I think we're just going to keep going. Science discovers truth, and it names it. And often science is catching up to some of the things that religion and art have intuited long before. There's a scientist named Robert Hooke who in the 17th century established what we would call cell theory, this idea that living things are built up of cells. But there is a Vedic teacher from 3 millennia ago named Parashara who actually spoke about something very similar millennia before. He said, in the leaf there are innumerable components. It has a boundary, a coloring matter, a sap inside, and they are not visible to the naked eye. And many believe that Parashara was intuiting this concept of cell theory that would not be talked about in the scientific community for another thousands of years, which really just leads us to this understanding that spirituality and science, they're not enemies. They're two sides of the same coin. Science appeals to the head, it appeals to our rational brain, our left brain, and spirituality, it appeals to the heart. And it does this primarily through story. Now, a word that in our culture can be somewhat divisive is this word myth. Because in recent time, we have really popularized this idea of busting myths, right? Mythbusters. Is it a fact or is it a myth, right? Like you eat a meal and then you have to wait 10 minutes before you go into the pool. Myth, that's not true. You all lied to us kids, okay? Not true. Myth. 30? No, it's 0. It's a myth. But myth, in its original usage, does not mean untrue. What myth actually means is true on a symbolic level. And see, this is something that people have done with wisdom texts such as the Bible. They go, either it's literally true or it's useless. It has no value. And yet, the lens of myth can give us back an enormous value for something that we might not be able to necessarily reconcile as being 100% literally true in all aspects. The author and professor and mythologist Joseph Campbell is one of the most well-known figures around the concept of myth in our modern day. And this is something that he said about mythology. Mythology is not a lie. Mythology is poetry. It is metaphorical. It has been well said that mythology is the penultimate truth. Penultimate because the ultimate cannot be put into words. It is beyond words. So science, step by step, approaches truth, piece by piece, in an attempt to learn a little bit more each step of the way. And yet mythology approaches truth with the heart. A mythology uses stories rather than facts. It's not any less valid of a way, it's just a different angle in. There are many quotes often attributed to the Buddha, and it's difficult for us to know which ones are certainly come from that lineage, but one quote that is often attributed to the Buddha, and at least we can say comes from the Buddhist lineage, is, imagine someone is trying to show you the moon by pointing at it. Don't mistake the finger for the moon. How often are both science and religion just fingers pointing at the moon? It's helpful. It's giving us a path. It's giving us a direction to follow. But we can still recognize it's incomplete. It's not the thing itself. It's guiding us toward the thing. We've said before in this room, the map is not the territory. Certainly it's valuable, but it's not the be-all, end-all. They give us clues, right? They give us language. Maybe, especially in the case of spirituality, these fingers pointing at the moon create avenues for us to actually develop relationship with the mystery through personification. See, Jesus and Buddha, I think of them as tour guides into the mystery. Not necessarily the end, but the means. Because if you look at the words of Jesus and Buddha, they both said, no, it's within you. You go on this journey. You find it. We're here to provide you a teaching. But they empowered the individual. So we have these tools to pursue the mystery, to create space for it, to develop relationship with it. And yet, as Kathleen reminded us, life is still just difficult. And beyond even the great, difficult challenges of life, there's also just a lot of distraction. You might think, yeah, well, it'd be great to spend life down the spiritual path pursuing mystery, but it's just hard to live in this world full of distractions, full of just so many things calling for our attention at any given time. Being human is a challenge in and of itself. It's not easy. I know for myself, I can get really easily discouraged in day-to-day life. Not too long ago, I was having car trouble, and so my car was in the shop a couple of times, like week after week, and then finally I got it back, and I went outside to the garage, and there was a nail in my tire, just beautifully, just perfect, like it had been perfectly, it was, perfect. And I was like, oh, man, like after all this, and have, another thing, great, And I thought, really in the back of my mind, the first thought was like, can I just sell the car? Like, can I just get rid of it? They can have the nail. Like, I just don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm easily discouraged. I'm being vulnerable. Or maybe you're thinking, yeah, Jake, this is great. This mystery talk is great. But really, at the end of the day, I don't have the bandwidth to care all that much because my problems are more than enough for me to deal with right now. And I understand that. But something that I truly believe is that so many of the problems that we face in our world, in our society, and in our daily life come from this sense of lack, this feeling that you and I, we don't have enough, we aren't enough. There's not enough time, there's not enough money. I am just not enough to take on all that my life requires of me. But I believe that this shift into mystery is actually also a shift into this understanding that you are enough, that you have enough. There's this understanding within mathematics. It's purely theoretical because anything involving infinity is theoretical. And I also just want to give a disclaimer. I'm not a mathematician. If you were under the impression that that's why I'm here is because I'm a mathematician, I'm not. So I just want to say that. But even using my 7th grade algebra education, I can come to you with this idea, which is basically that you cannot divide infinity, okay? Infinity divided by any possible number would still equal infinity. And this reality that we're in feels as though it's infinite, always. That we go out, we look out into outer space, and it just goes, and the further out we go, the more we study, the more we realize it's a lot older and it's a lot larger than we previously understood. Or we go on the deeply small level into the quantum realm, and we just keep, like we said, we keep splitting the particles over and over again, and it just gets smaller, and also it gets a lot weirder the smaller that you go. And so here you and I are, in what, at least to us, appears to be the middle of the infinite in both directions. But if you can't divide infinity, then you and I, in our little you-sized piece of the universe, in this little me-sized piece of the universe, we're still infinite because you cannot divide infinity. Yes, our lives are finite. Yes, these bodies are finite, but we belong to something infinite. And this is what is meant by the term the great beyond. That we're not separate from the mystery, but we are included, we belong to it, we are part of something greater with it. Or, as Rumi might say, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the ocean in a drop. See, Rumi was what many people would call a mystic. Some would say that Jesus was the same. They both come from different religious traditions, but they spoke about spirituality in a way that was mystery-centric, in a way that really emphasized surrendering to something bigger than what we could understand and developing a connection with it. And also asserting that this is not just some abstract idea, but actually improves our quality of life in the here and the now. Because think about the relief that it provides to know that you belong on a cosmic level, you belong. Richard Rohr says, when God is no longer out there or over there, we have begun the mystical journey. We have started to see as the mystics see. And yet so often, our goal is to try to understand God, to understand life. I know in my own life, I've tried to become a scholar of life as a way of controlling everything, of understanding everything, but more often than not, it has just resulted in me feeling separate from my experience of life. There are many theologians out there that have thought endlessly and speculated about God, but they have turned God into an object, and in trying to understand, they've actually disconnected themselves with a direct experience. And this journey that I've experienced in my life, it's almost felt like a battle at times between my head and my heart, between trying to think through things versus the surrender of just purely feeling. And this dichotomy, I think, really alludes to this dynamic between searching for the meaning of life and actually living life. Campbell said this, people say that what we're all seeking is a meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think that what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that our life experiences on the purely physical plane will have resonances with our own innermost being and reality, so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive. Alan Watts said something very similar in his own words. The meaning of life is just to be alive. It is so plain and so obvious and so simple, and yet everybody rushes around in a great panic as if it were necessary to achieve something beyond themselves. Even Nietzsche commented on this reality. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a mystery to be lived. So, when approaching the great beyonds in your life, when approaching the God-sized questions in your heart, here are just a couple of encouragements. One, what if giving up on trying to fully understand is not an end, but a beginning of something? And two, we don't need to be afraid of what we don't understand because we are a part of it. We belong to it. In Matthew 10:39, Jesus said, to find your life, you must lose your life. And I wonder if what he was saying is, if we can lose this small view of our life, this view of our life that we are disconnected from everything, that we are living our own separate, small existence, and everything is at odds with everything. If we can lose that life, then maybe the life that we might find is that of interconnection, is a life of belonging, is a life of knowing that we are loved just for being itself. So Aldea, may we be willing to let go of our long-held ideas about self, about God, about reality that are no longer serving us, that are no longer connecting us. May we start to see the blanket truth in everyone and everything. And may we let go of the perfect answer for what the meaning of life is, so we can actually have a true, rich experience of being alive.